15 disturbing mysteries that continue to haunt investigators. Some mysteries fade with time. As witnesses disappear, evidence deteriorates, and memories become unreliable. But some cases refuse to die. Some grow stranger with every passing year. Tonight, we're going to explore a collection of disturbing mysteries that continue to haunt investigators, researchers, and anyone unfortunate enough to stumble into their rabbit holes. Cases involving unexplained deaths, missing people, bizarre discoveries, and events so unsettling that even decades later, nobody can confidently explain what really happened. As always, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare yourself for mysteries that remain trapped somewhere between fact and nightmare. Our first story begins high in the mountains of Siberia, a place where help is far away, a place where the weather can kill you in hours, and where one young woman watched her friends die one by one, under circumstances nobody has ever been able to explain. Story 1. The Khamar-Daban Pass Tragedy. Imagine standing on a freezing mountainside. The wind is screaming. Snow is blowing sideways. Visibility is fading. You're exhausted, cold, hungry, but you're alive. Then the person walking beside you suddenly starts screaming. Not from fear, not from pain, just screaming, as blood begins pouring from their face. Moments later, they collapse dead into the snow. Now imagine it happens again, and again, and again, until you're the only person left alive. That is exactly what happened in Siberia during the summer of 1993. And to this day, nobody knows why. The Khamar-Daban mountain range stretches across southern Siberia. It's beautiful, remote, and unforgiving. The kind of place where a mistake can become fatal long before rescue teams ever learn you're missing. In August of 1993, a group of experienced hikers set out to cross part of the mountain range. Leading the expedition was a respected hiking instructor named Lyudmila Korovina. She wasn't a beginner, far from it. She had spent years guiding people through difficult terrain. The hikers trusted her completely. Most of them were young, strong, athletic, and excited to prove themselves. Nobody had any reason to believe this trip would become one of Russia's most disturbing mysteries. The group began their trek under reasonably normal conditions. Weather forecasts suggested manageable conditions. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. But mountains don't care about forecasts. Within days, conditions changed dramatically. Cold rain battered the hikers. Strong winds swept across exposed slopes. Temperatures dropped. Yet the group continued moving. They were determined to complete their route. Looking back, some investigators believe the first warning signs appeared here. Certain decisions made during the journey have been questioned ever since. One night, instead of camping near the protection of nearby forested areas, the group established camp on an exposed mountainside. The weather was deteriorating. A storm was developing, yet they remained out in the open. Why? Nobody knows. Perhaps they believed they could handle it. Perhaps they underestimated the danger. Perhaps something else influenced the decision. Whatever the reason, the following morning would change everything. The hikers packed their equipment and prepared to continue. Nothing seemed unusual, at least at first. Then one member of the group suddenly stopped. He appeared disoriented, confused, almost as if he didn't understand where he was. Witnesses later reported that his behavior became increasingly strange. Then blood began flowing from his nose. then his ears, then his mouth. Within moments, he collapsed, dead, just like that. No warning, no prolonged illness, no obvious injury. One moment alive, the next moment gone. The group was horrified. Most had never witnessed a death before. Now they were standing in the middle of nowhere, watching a healthy young hiker die for reasons nobody could understand. Their leader, Ludmila, was devastated. The victim had been especially close to her. Some described their relationship as almost mother and son. She ordered the others to move down the mountain. She stayed behind, perhaps to gather herself, perhaps to remain with the body, perhaps because she believed the danger had passed. But it hadn't. Less than a minute later, the hikers heard her shouting, calling for help, desperately. They turned around and ran back. What they found would haunt them forever. Ludmila was on the ground, blood pouring from her face, convulsing, dying. Within moments, she was gone too. 2 healthy people had died within minutes. No explanation, no apparent cause, no sign of attack, no sign of poisoning. Nothing. Just death. Then things became even worse. Much worse. Panic spread through the group, and that's when the remaining hikers began displaying symptoms. One reportedly tore at their clothing. Another began acting irrationally. Several appeared confused and terrified. Witnesses described behavior resembling madness. People screaming, running, falling, foaming at the mouth. The mountain had become a nightmare. Nobody understood what was happening. Nobody knew if they would be next. The surviving hikers made a decision. Run. Just run. Get away from whatever was killing them. One survivor later recalled watching another member collapse behind her, blood emerging from multiple parts of his body. He never got back up. Now imagine being 17 years old, alone, lost, thousands of miles from help. Your friends are dead. Your leader is dead. The people you trusted most in the world are gone. And you have absolutely no idea what killed them. That was the reality facing the expedition's sole survivor, Valentina. She ran for hours, maybe longer. Fear can distort time. The mountains became an endless maze of rock, wind, and snow. Eventually, darkness arrived. She found herself completely alone. No tent, no support, no certainty that she would survive until morning. Somehow she did. The next day she returned, partly out of hope, partly out of disbelief. Perhaps someone had survived. Perhaps help had arrived. Perhaps what she'd witnessed wasn't real. But when she reached the area, she found only bodies. Her friends were dead. All of them. The mountain was silent. No movement, no voices, no answers. For days she wandered through the wilderness, alone, hungry, exhausted, traumatized. Eventually she found civilization. Rescuers launched a search operation, but locating the bodies proved difficult. The region was vast, remote, and dangerous. Weeks passed. Then the dead hikers were finally discovered. The condition of the bodies raised even more questions. Many appeared frozen in positions suggesting extreme distress, as if their final moments had been terrifying. Autopsies produced frustrating results. Investigators expected to find some obvious cause. Instead, they found almost nothing. No major injuries, no evidence of assault, no clear poison. no disease capable of explaining the rapid deaths. Only one detail stood out. Many showed signs of internal damage to their lungs. But even that failed to explain the bizarre behavior witnesses described. Over the years, countless theories emerged. Hypothermia, avalanches, toxic gas, poisoned food, military experiments, secret chemical weapons testing, even infrasound and psychological phenomena. Each theory explained part of the mystery. None explained all of it. Why did the symptoms appear so suddenly? Why did multiple healthy hikers die within minutes? Why were other hiking groups in the region unaffected? Why was there only one survivor? And perhaps most importantly, why has nobody been able to reproduce or explain what happened? More than 30 years later, the mountain remains silent. The dead cannot speak. The survivor can only describe what she witnessed, and investigators remain trapped in the same place they've been for decades, with questions without answers. But as strange as this case is, our next mystery may be even more baffling, because it involves a man who disappeared from Texas only to be discovered dead 1,600 miles away, living under circumstances that make absolutely no sense. And even after investigators identified his body, the biggest questions remained unanswered. Story 2. The man who vanished, then turned up. 1,600 miles away. Imagine arriving home after a weekend trip. You unlock the front door, step inside, and immediately notice something feels wrong. Not because the house has been ransacked, not because anything has been stolen, but because someone is missing. Your husband should be there. His car is gone, his phone isn't answering, and nobody has heard from him. At first, you assume he'll walk through the door any minute. Maybe he's running errands. Maybe he's stuck in traffic. Maybe something unexpected came up. But hours pass. Then days. Then weeks. And eventually, you realize he's vanished. Completely. Now imagine waiting 10 years for answers, only to discover that your husband had actually died the very next day, more than 1,600 miles away. And even after identifying his body, nobody could explain what he was doing there, or why he went there in the first place. This mystery begins in Amarillo, Texas, a quiet city where attorney David Glenn Lewis lived with his wife Karen and their daughter. By all accounts, David lived a stable life. He had a successful legal career, a family that loved him, friends who respected him, and no obvious reason to disappear. At least, that's what everyone thought. In late January of 1993, Karen and her daughter traveled to Dallas for a shopping trip. David remained behind. The plan was simple. They would return home a few days later. Everything appeared normal. Nothing suggested the family was about to be pulled into one of America's strangest missing person cases. When Karen returned home, she expected to find David waiting. Instead, the house was empty. At first, she wasn't alarmed, but then she noticed something odd. David's wedding ring was sitting on the kitchen counter. His watch was beside it. David never removed either item. Friends later confirmed that. He wore them constantly. Yet now, both had been deliberately left behind, almost as if someone wanted them found. There were other strange details too. The television had been set to record the Super Bowl, a football game David had apparently planned to watch. The tape continued recording long after the game ended. Freshly made sandwiches sat untouched. His clothes remained in the house. His belongings remained in the house. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing appeared disturbed. It looked less like someone disappearing and more like someone being interrupted. Karen immediately contacted authorities. An investigation began. Detectives searched the home. No signs of forced entry. No signs of violence. No evidence of a struggle. Nothing. It was as though David had simply walked away. But why? That question would haunt investigators for years. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered information Karen hadn't initially considered significant. Shortly before vanishing, David had told her something disturbing. He believed somebody was threatening him. Not joking, not exaggerating, genuinely threatening him. But whenever Karen asked for details, he refused to elaborate. He never identified the person, never explained the situation, never revealed why he felt endangered. Only that something wasn't right. Investigators immediately focused on his career. David was an attorney, and attorneys often make enemies. Disputes, court cases, financial conflicts, people angry over legal decisions. There were countless possibilities. The challenge was figuring out which one mattered, if any. Then another discovery complicated everything. David's vehicle was found parked in downtown Amarillo. Inside the car were his personal belongings, his driver's license, his credit cards, his keys. Everything. Most missing persons take something. Money, identification, a suitcase, a change of clothes. David appeared to have taken almost nothing. Months passed. No sightings, no phone calls, no activity on financial accounts, no clues, no body, no explanation. The case slowly grew colder. But then investigators uncovered something bizarre, something that transformed the case completely. Before disappearing, David had purchased airline tickets, multiple tickets, and none of them made sense. One reservation showed him traveling from Dallas back toward Amarillo. Another suggested plans involving Los Angeles. Yet nobody could confirm whether he boarded any of those flights. The travel records created more questions than answers. It was as though someone had scattered puzzle pieces across the country, then removed the picture from the box. Years rolled by. Friends aged. Family waited. Leads dried up. The mystery appeared destined to remain unsolved forever.
Then something extraordinary happened. A detective made a connection, one that nobody else had noticed. 10 years earlier, on a highway in Washington state, a body had been discovered. A middle-aged man, dead, lying near a roadway. He carried no identification, no documents, nothing revealing who he was. Authorities labeled him a John Doe, an unidentified man, one of thousands. And eventually, his file joined countless others gathering dust in storage. But this John Doe had always been strange. Witnesses described unusual clothing. His appearance didn't fit the surrounding circumstances. Investigators never learned where he came from, how he arrived there, or why he was in Washington. Eventually, the trail went cold. For 10 years, the unidentified body remained exactly that, unidentified. Until advances in forensic technology allowed investigators to revisit the case. DNA testing finally provided an answer. The John Doe wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a transient traveler. He was David Glenn Lewis, the missing attorney from Texas. The discovery solved one mystery.
David had been found, but it created 10 new ones. How had he traveled 1,600 miles? Why was he in Washington state? Why hadn't he contacted his family? Why leave behind his ring, his watch, his belongings, his car? Most importantly, what happened during the final days of his life? Investigators retraced every step they could. Unfortunately, there weren't many. The gap between Texas and Washington remained largely empty, almost as if David had vanished from one reality and appeared in another. Some theorized he was fleeing threats. Others believed he may have been involved in something secretive. A few suspected a mental health crisis, but none of those theories fully fit the evidence. The airline tickets remained mysterious. His behavior remained mysterious. His journey remained mysterious. Even the circumstances surrounding his death remained unclear. Every explanation seemed to leave crucial questions unanswered. And that is what makes this case so haunting. Most mysteries eventually lose their uncertainty. New evidence emerges, witnesses speak, technology advances, something breaks the stalemate. But not here. Today, more than 3 decades later, David's family finally knows where he ended up. But they still don't know why. And sometimes, knowing where someone died isn't nearly as important as understanding how they got there. Somewhere between Texas and Washington, the truth disappeared. Perhaps forever. And if you think that's disturbing, our next story begins with a simple travel video. An ordinary tourist recording what appeared to be a beautiful red lake. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, just scenery. But hidden in the background of the footage was an object almost nobody noticed. An object that may have contained the remains of a murder victim. And by the time anyone realized it, years had already passed. Story 3. The Red Lake Suitcase. A few years ago, a traveler stood beside a lake and pressed record. Nothing unusual, no mystery, no crime, just another tourist capturing a beautiful landscape. The video lasted only a few minutes. Afterward, it was uploaded online and forgotten, like millions of other travel videos. But hidden in the background, barely visible near the shoreline, was something investigators would later become obsessed with. A dark object, partially submerged, motionless, easy to miss. The kind of thing your eyes slide over without a second thought. At the time, nobody knew it might be connected to a dead body. The story begins near a remote lake famous for its unusual appearance. Depending on weather conditions and mineral content, the water sometimes takes on a deep, reddish color. Photographs of the lake spread rapidly online. Visitors traveled from surrounding regions to see it for themselves. Some came to hike. Others came to take photographs. And a few arrived simply to enjoy the scenery. One of those visitors unknowingly captured a detail that would become incredibly important years later. But nobody noticed. Not then. Several years passed. Life continued. People forgot about the video. The tourist moved on. The footage disappeared into the endless ocean of content uploaded every day. Then authorities received a disturbing report. A person had gone missing. Not recently. Long enough that investigators were becoming concerned.
Friends hadn't heard from them. Family couldn't reach them. Search efforts produced nothing. No phone activity, no financial activity, no confirmed sightings. The person had simply vanished, and as weeks turned into months, hope began fading. Detectives followed every lead they could find. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, former partners, strangers who claimed to know something. Most tips led nowhere. Some were outright fabrications. Others seemed promising before collapsing under scrutiny. Eventually, investigators found themselves confronting a reality familiar to every missing persons unit. There was almost no evidence. Then someone remembered the lake. Not because of a crime, not because of a witness, but because of a photograph. Authorities began reviewing publicly available images and videos taken around the area. Thousands of pictures, hours of footage, an exhausting process. Most showed exactly what you'd expect: tourists, wildlife, scenery, nothing more. Then somebody paused a frame, zoomed in, and noticed something unusual. Near the edge of the water, partially hidden among vegetation, sat what appeared to be a large suitcase, dark-colored, weathered, unattended. At first glance, it wasn't remarkable. People lose luggage all the time. Illegal dumping happens everywhere. The object could have been sitting there for years. But investigators couldn't ignore it. The location was too isolated. The timing was too interesting. And the object appeared strangely out of place. A search team was dispatched. When they arrived, the suitcase was still there, exactly where it had appeared in the video. Silent, motionless, waiting. Investigators opened it and immediately understood they were dealing with something far darker than abandoned luggage. Inside were human remains. The discovery transformed the entire investigation. What had once been a missing persons case suddenly became a homicide inquiry. Forensic specialists rushed to identify the victim. Detectives began retracing every known movement connected to the area. The questions multiplied instantly. Who placed the suitcase there? When? Why choose such a location? And perhaps most importantly, how had it remained undiscovered for so long? The answer was unsettling, because hundreds of people had likely passed nearby. Tourists had taken photographs. Visitors had recorded videos. Some may have unknowingly pointed cameras directly at the suitcase. Yet nobody realized what they were looking at. It had been hiding in plain sight. When investigators examined older footage, they made another disturbing discovery. The suitcase appeared in images captured long before authorities found it. Months, possibly years. The exact timeline remained difficult to establish, but one thing became clear. The evidence had been sitting there the entire time. Visible, yet invisible. Seen by countless eyes, recognized by none. Imagine that for a moment. Imagine recording vacation footage, uploading it online, then years later receiving a call from police. They tell you that somewhere in your video, a murder victim may have been visible. Not the killer, not the crime itself, but evidence connected to it. Evidence everyone overlooked. How many other clues exist like that? How many secrets appear briefly in the background of ordinary moments, only to be discovered years later? Detectives worked tirelessly. Forensic teams analyzed the remains. Witnesses were interviewed. Timelines were constructed. But despite the discovery, many critical questions remained unanswered. The suitcase revealed where the victim ended up. It did not reveal how they got there. It did not reveal who carried them there. And it certainly didn't reveal why. The case attracted widespread attention. Internet communities began examining old photographs. Online investigators searched for additional clues. Every image became a potential lead. Every shadow became a possible suspect. Every unexplained detail sparked new theories. Some believed the killer was local. Others argued the victim had been transported from far away. A few proposed elaborate conspiracies involving organized crime. Yet evidence supporting any single theory remained frustratingly limited. As time passed, the suitcase became the symbol of the entire mystery. Not because it solved the case, but because it represented something deeply unsettling. The idea that horrific secrets can remain hidden in plain sight. That evidence can exist right in front of us. Visible, documented, recorded, and still go unnoticed. Even today, the image remains disturbing. A quiet red lake, beautiful scenery, calm water, and somewhere near the shoreline, a suitcase containing a secret nobody understood until years later. Most mysteries begin with something disappearing. A person, a witness, a piece of evidence. This mystery was the opposite. The evidence never disappeared. It sat there the entire time, waiting for someone to finally see it. But our next case may be even more disturbing, because it doesn't involve one victim, or two. It involves an entire family. 11 people, living together under the same roof, seemingly ordinary, seemingly happy, seemingly successful. Until one morning, neighbors looked inside their home and discovered a scene so bizarre that investigators initially wondered if they were witnessing the aftermath of a cult ritual. And even now, many people refuse to believe the official explanation. The mystery of the Burari house begins next. Story 4. The Burari House of Death. There are some crime scenes that investigators never forget. Not because of violence, not because of blood, not because of brutality, but because the scene simply doesn't make sense. The human mind desperately searches for a logical explanation, a reason, a motive, something, anything. Yet every answer seems to create even more questions. This is one of those cases. A case involving 11 members of the same family, found dead inside their own home, arranged in a manner so bizarre that even experienced investigators struggled to process what they were seeing. And perhaps the most disturbing part, many people believe they willingly participated. The story begins in Burari, a densely populated neighborhood in northern India. The family at the center of this mystery was well known, respected, successful, hard-working. Neighbors described them as friendly and close-knit, the kind of family people admired. They owned businesses, maintained strong relationships, participated in community events. Nothing about them suggested tragedy was approaching. From the outside, they appeared perfectly normal.
And that's what made everything so terrifying. The family consisted of 3 generations living together under one roof. Parents, children, grandchildren. A large household united by strong family bonds. Visitors often remarked on how connected they seemed, how supportive they were of one another, how harmonious the home appeared. There were occasional disagreements, like any family, but nothing alarming, nothing indicating danger, nothing hinting that within those walls, something deeply disturbing was developing. On the morning of July 1st, 2018, a neighbor noticed something unusual. The family's shop had not opened. That alone was strange. The business owners were known for their consistency. They rarely deviated from routine. Hours passed. Still no sign of activity. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages remained unread. Concern began growing. Eventually, someone approached the house. They knocked. No response. They called out. Nothing. The silence felt wrong. A decision was made to investigate further. Someone looked inside and immediately froze. What they saw would soon shock an entire nation. Police arrived quickly. Officers entered the residence. The moment they stepped inside, they knew this wasn't an ordinary death investigation. 10 family members were discovered hanging in a large room, arranged in a strange formation, their eyes covered, their mouths sealed, their hands bound. The positioning appeared almost ritualistic, almost ceremonial, as though the scene had been carefully planned, almost impossible to comprehend. Nearby, an elderly family member was discovered dead in a separate room. Unlike the others, she was not hanging, but she too had died, bringing the total number of victims to 11. 11 people from the same family, gone. News spread rapidly. The public immediately began speculating. Cult activity, mass murder, religious sacrifice, supernatural influence. Theories exploded across television and social media because nobody could imagine a rational explanation. Not for something like this. Investigators began searching the residence. Every room, every cabinet, every drawer, every possible clue. Initially, they suspected foul play. It seemed impossible that 11 people would voluntarily participate in such an event. Surely someone forced them. Surely someone orchestrated it. Surely there had to be a killer. Then detectives discovered something hidden inside the house, something that would completely change the investigation. A collection of notebooks, hundreds of pages, carefully written, meticulously organized, documenting events spanning years. At first, the journals appeared ordinary. Family notes, schedules, daily observations, nothing unusual. Then investigators continued reading, and the entries became stranger, much stranger. The notebooks contained detailed instructions, specific behaviors, specific rituals, specific actions family members were expected to perform. Some entries described practices intended to bring prosperity. Others promised spiritual protection. Some claimed deceased relatives were communicating with the family, guiding them, watching over them, providing instructions. And according to the journals, the family appeared to believe it. The deeper investigators looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. Many of the notebook entries focused on a deceased patriarch, a man who had died years earlier.
The writings suggested his spirit remained present, still influencing family decisions, still communicating through one particular family member, a man named Lalit. According to relatives and friends, Lalit had experienced a significant life event years earlier. Following that event, his behavior gradually changed. Not dramatically, not enough to alarm people immediately, just small differences, small shifts, the kind people often overlook, until they become impossible to ignore. The journals suggested Lalit believed he could receive messages from his deceased father, guidance, instructions, warnings. Over time, those messages allegedly became increasingly detailed and increasingly influential, not only over him, but over the entire family. Investigators faced an unsettling possibility. What if nobody forced the family? What if they willingly followed instructions they genuinely believed would help them? What if the notebooks represented years of gradual psychological influence? Years of reinforcement, years of trust, years of belief. A possibility that many experts later described as shared delusion. Yet even that explanation left people uncomfortable, because it raised another question. How does an entire family become convinced of something so extreme? Psychologists examined the case extensively. Many argued that trust played a crucial role. Families often rely on one another, especially in close-knit households. If a respected member expresses certainty, others may gradually accept their conclusions, particularly when those conclusions appear to produce positive outcomes: prosperity, success, family unity. And according to many accounts, the family had indeed experienced success, which may have reinforced their faith in the guidance they believed they were receiving. The notebooks contained references to a ritual, one supposedly intended to bring spiritual rewards, protection, growth, blessings. And perhaps most disturbingly, some entries implied participants believed they would survive, that the process was temporary, that they would be rescued, that everything would be fine. Imagine reading instructions from someone you trust completely, someone you believe has never led you astray, someone you believe is guided by a higher power. Now imagine following those instructions without questioning them, step by step, until there is no turning back. Investigators eventually concluded that the deaths likely resulted from the family's participation in the ritual described in the journals. Officially, the case was considered solved, but not everyone accepted that conclusion. Critics pointed to unanswered questions. Could 11 individuals truly participate willingly? Did everyone understand what was happening? Was someone manipulating the others? Were all family members equally convinced? Or were some simply following the group? Questions lingered. Debates continued. And for many people, the mystery never fully ended. Even today, the Barari house remains one of the most unsettling cases ever documented. Not because investigators failed to identify suspects, not because evidence was missing, but because the explanation itself is frightening. The possibility that ordinary people, loving people, successful people, can slowly become trapped inside a belief system so powerful that reality itself begins to bend around it. 11 family members, one house, hundreds of pages of instructions, and a mystery that continues to disturb everyone who studies it. Because sometimes the most frightening monsters aren't hiding in the dark. They're hiding inside ideas, inside beliefs, inside the human mind itself. But our next mystery takes us somewhere completely different. A luxury hotel, a missing traveler, security cameras, electronic keycards,
and a timeline so confusing that years later, investigators still struggle to explain exactly what happened. One woman checked into a hotel. She never checked out, and the truth behind her disappearance remains buried beneath a maze of unanswered questions. That story begins next.